Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my little talk. Daniel, thank you very much for your kind invite to the conference regarding the future of... I kind of changed it a little bit, just in case anybody thought I knew anything about biking and running. I do not know much about those. So it is the future of swim training, and we're going to touch on some ideas, some concepts. I've been coaching for many, many years. I've never known a year like this. Obviously, it's unparalleled. Unprecedented in any way, shape or form. And I think Daniel was asking what we could look towards next year, how we can maximize our swim training. Obviously there's a lot of unknowns at the moment until pools stabilize. Will they reopen? They should do next week. It is now Friday the 26th, is it? Yeah. Obviously, I'm on childcare duty, so apologies for not being there live today at the actual conference, but I've got a little one and he's in the baby monitor, so apologies if the sound isn't that great, but I'm just listening in to him upstairs while my wife's at work. So the future of swim training, how might that unfold? I've been coaching a small London-based swim school. I'm Dan at swimfortry.com. If you have any questions, follow-ups, please don't hesitate. I came from an elite swim background, discovered triathlon in the 90s, helped some youngsters go to the London Youth Games, got the bug, eventually entered the London Triathlon myself. As a newcomer to open water swimming, I did not particularly enjoy it. I wouldn't say I quite panicked, but it wasn't far off. So I've had to learn how to swim in open water, and back then there weren't any qualifications, weren't any manuals really, so I raced a lot, and then eventually people asked how I swam the way I did, and I was just sort of combining what I knew as an elite pool swimmer with what I was experiencing and finding as in open water. And enough people asked, and eventually my sister and I started Swim for Try, and we left our existing full-time job. So it's been almost 20 years. It's been amazing, but like I said, this year has been quite unusual. And what do we have in store for next year that's going to be strange? Swim training in the new world, that's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Let's hope things get back to normal next year as best they can. But at the moment, we're finding that small coaching groups, we would hire lanes, triathlon clubs, masters clubs, you probably won't get as much access as you previously had. For instance, at London Bridge, Tuesday nights we have a 4-lane 25-meter pool. Used to comfortably cater for 32 swimmers with 2 coaches, and now that's down to 20 swimmers. So let's ignore the financial implications for that. Literally great on the one hand that we have a little bit more space for each swimmer, but obviously there are other restrictions. I can't bring on those 12 people. Tri clubs may not get the times. The pool managers are telling us that the demand for lane space from the public is sort of overloading them, and we're getting shifted to graveyard shifts late on Sunday and so on. So if we can actually find something. There's also this implication, if you can get access to a pool, lower heart rate work is recommended by Swim England and some of the other governing bodies, and reduced levels of breathing, just so you know, you don't want to breathe on your neighbor. So you know, those are things we need to take into account. So we had a fortunate summer in that we did manage to get our lake open. It was inundated with new swimmers because the pools were closed, and I think we can, with some planning, we can work towards those lakes reopening, unless you are a really hardy winter cold water swimmer. What can we do in the meantime? And that's sort of what I wanted to talk about. We will have some pool access. We will be able to get into the public sessions. We may just have to be a bit more careful with how we structure things and move forwards with that. So if we have limited or no pool swimming, and it's too early for the lakes to open, what are my options? Now, if you had space and money, an endless pool at home is an amazing opportunity. Not cheap, not easy. You do need some space. I have had them before for teaching from, and they're a great tool. From a fitness perspective, it's a little bit dull. You know, imagine a treadmill for swimmers. You're just gazing at one spot. The addition of waterproof headphones can be of benefit, but you literally don't go anywhere. So, you know, for a teaching tool, learning to streamline, learn to swim against the current, fantastic. Fitness is going to be quite, you know, and actually some might argue that, you know, if you're doing an Ironman, you do need to be mentally strong, so it may not be a bad thing. Equally, a cheaper option will be paddling pool with Tether. We saw that become quite a popular option in the summer, and you know, again, it's nothing wrong with that. It's not a new concept. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. You know, swimmers being tethered is something that's happened many, many years. Again, it's dull. I would be careful with you know, the water quality. You will have to replace that, and you know, there are considerations and concerns that that's a fair amount of water being tossed away on a regular basis. But anyway, that's possibly not until the spring either. So let's bring it indoors. What have we got? You've got a wide range of swim benches now. There are fair few manufacturers that offer these now. One brand, Vasa, has sort of become the go-to name, go-to model. There's two options, and you can sort of see them on the video now being utilized. There's the old-fashioned trainer, where you literally slide up and down as you pull the body over a fixed hand position. You slide up and down. And then the more modern is the erg, where a little bit more like a rowing machine. You know, you've got two individual paddles attached via cable. You remain a little bit more stationary, and the arms do the work with an underwater movement. There's limited body rotation, so I would recommend you get off, do some standing rotation work, get back on, and then that will help you make the most of that. Flat body position, yeah, it's I would not go into any kind of surface recovery. That is not going to be helpful. That will grind your shoulders. It will promote a low wide recovery, and that's something that's not, your shoulders will not thank you for. So stand, leave the bench, stand up, get some rotation work done. There's various options for that. You can email me if you want a little bit of Dryland advice. That's absolutely no problem. But swim benches, fantastic. Again, you don't really go anywhere. Can be a little bit dull. I often sneak a laptop underneath and catch up on some Netflix. There's your options. Stretch cords. You should have invested in these a long time ago. They're fantastic. Now again, for 30-40 minute replacing swimming main sets, that's not gonna be easy. They can be a little dull because again, you don't go anywhere. You're not in the water, but I think as with all things, I would try to replicate a swimming body position as best as possible. And for that, on our weekly stretch cord sessions, I actually take a standing position. I've linked my stretch cords up and over from the ceiling, and I actually stand and I pull down as if I'm, you know, my body is now in one alignment. Whereas if I'm standing and the stretch cords are tethered to a wall or a door post, and then I'm pivoted at the hips, granted, the upper body's horizontal, but the legs, obviously, it's a pretty awkward. It can impact a little bit on your breathing if you do it for too long. So standing, and hopefully you can see the images of that, you get the full body rotation as well. So again, many benefits. But you're welcome to join us on our stretch cord sessions Monday, Wednesday at 12:30. What else can we do? If by some chance gyms are opening, or you have weights at home and the pools aren't open and it's still too early for open water, you can obviously exercise your swimming muscles. Now the problem with this is swimming is very much a finesse sport, very technical, and if you can load the arms, the shoulders with resistance, but actually perform the swimming movements, you will be much better for it. Just to go and sort of work on your shoulders, lifting weights up and down, I mean, it's better than doing nothing, but it doesn't really help your swimming progress. What else is there in that world? Crossover options such as rowing. I mentioned that rowing. I like to do a lot of rowing. I think that mental toughness it brings. It is a very hard sport on the erg. It really is not easy. you will work everything a lot like swimming works practically everything. You will be exhausted when you get off if you haven't done it before, and you should slowly build up sensibly like anything. But it is pretty tough, and with that, again, it's better than nothing, but it's not swimming. So think about, maybe an all-round package. You need your fitness, but you also, which you can get from rowing, but you do need some swimming specific movements. 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds for a pair of stretch cords, absolutely. And you'll thank me for that later on. If you haven't raced yet and you're thinking about racing next year and everything comes back to normal, then by all means, on race day, you can get a dryland warm-up organized. You will start your swim in a much better state if you have exercised and lightly warmed up and got the swimming musculature actually warm and ready. Jumping into London Docklands, it's pretty cool in there, even in the height of summer. The chaos of everybody warming up in different directions, you won't get a proper warm-up done. So, they're useful for sort of any rehab exercises. And again, drop me a line. I'll be happy to share some information, dryland work that will make the best of them. So, I would definitely have those in my arsenal of equipment if I'm not able to get to the pool. Some other ideas that have come about the last few years. ICOS is sort of a visualize, well, not, it is kind of visualization. You actually watch an image, a little bit like those virtual reality goggles, and you watch swimming images inside of elite swimmers, and it's based on a theory of neuroplasticity. I'm not an expert. I've read some people that have really thought great things about it. Other think it's a little bit weird science and it's a little bit clumsy. Jury's out. I'm not too sure. But when I used to work in the world of triathlon a little bit more, on race day, again, sitting there watching, repeating, having clients watch images, not a bad thing. Okay, again, it's not going to replace going to the pool, but it's just one more thing. Not too expensive, but something that can help with. I think they've got an app out as well now, so that's IKKOS. Linked to that visualization, no harm in thinking great technique, watching great technique, watch the Olympics on YouTube if you got access to it. Absolutely fantastic. I just updated some qualifications and included some sports psychology, and absolutely, watching good images of people performing great technique, a great way to help. Won't replace, but it will help. And then again, of course, keeping aerobically fit, biking, running. You will be doing that as triathletes, I'm sure. Maybe if you haven't got access to the pool, you have previously been a long distance open water swimmer, maybe you're adding in some biking and running. That's absolutely all good stuff. I mentioned that if you are going to work your swimming technique on dry land, think about your technique, think about your body position, try to closely mimic all that is the best for you in the water and what you can do. Drag, basic principles, increasing propulsion, minimizing your resistance, all solid principles that you really, really want. I see people, I grabbed this cycling image, and I see people on the swim benches with their toes dropping down. If you can, why not point your toes? Even put a pull buoy between your legs, again, just for kind of that concentration of leg position, keeping them narrow and hidden behind the trunk. It will cross over into, when you do eventually get back to swimming, so much more accurately. That would be ideal. Yeah, so just think about your swimming technique when you do perform anything, even to obviously you've got these cheaper stretch cords now with sort of just handles, and you grab onto them and you keep your fists clenched. I've tried to use them with an open palm. Obviously, if you're pulling, that can be a little bit irritating. Why not spend the extra and get a hand paddle shaped stretch cord, and then that way you're actually pushing through and keeping the hand in the right position. Ideal. Pools hopefully are reopening, but we haven't got as much access previously. Your tri club's not allowed back in. You've got to tolerate sorry, but you've got to tolerate some public swimming. How can you make the best use of that time? Well, that's going to be tricky. You need to be patient. You need to come prepared. You need to have something planned, organized, be accountable, have something set by your coach, or find something online, have something, because by the time you cycle to the pool, drive to the pool, get changed, have a look out, it's a bit crowded, the enthusiasm dampens a little bit. Suddenly you're thinking, oh, I've got something else. We know swimming is the tedious one in terms of preparation, arrival, changing room, access, getting in, compared to just opening the door and going for a run. And we're sorry about that, but unless you've got the endless pool option available, this is kind of what we've been dealt with at the moment. So have a session prepared, have a good session prepared. Be prepared to be flexible. Fartlek training we steal from the world of running, and a long continuous swim where you change pace as when the gaps open and close wouldn't do you any harm. Obviously there's very little structure there, but if the pool's particularly busy, often you find that 4 or 5 person chain gangs form, and there'll be gaps. In a 50-meter pool, 6 people in a row looks busy, but actually you've got a good 50-60 meters of clear water, potentially, maybe not the height of summer in some of the pools we visit, but you've got gaps, and if you can work hard there and then calm it down if and when you get stuck onto a chain. If you can compartmentalize your session, be prepared to move lanes. Now, it's common sense, but sometimes it's a little bit tedious to drop down to a slower lane for your drills, for maybe some kick work or some slower stuff, changing lanes, getting into a new position. But unfortunately, that is sort of what we're up against at the moment. As you can see, avoiding the wider strokes, and sometimes I don't discount front crawl. Try to stay narrow with your stroke. That's not a bad technique anyway, but the breaststroke, the butterflies, a lot of pools have actually stopped people from swimming those just because we don't want to run into any problems. So if we're in the world of triathlon, if we're in the world of long distance front crawl, open water swimming, performing front crawl is not the end of the world. If you can, when it's right, when it's safe, add in the other strokes as a long-term project, fantastic. The cross-training benefits will be good. Your shoulders will thank you from the hours and hours of repetition of just performing front crawl. You may want a little bit more flexibility in terms of not relying on strict intervals. Talk to your coach, explain that you might not have a pace clock, you probably have a watch with you, but it just may not be feasible to run your regular sort of 2100s on a certain interval and so on. Be a little bit more creative. By that, I mean, I think without a coach on poolside, without the camaraderie of your teammates from your tri club, swimming, staring at the bottom, up and down, trust me, I've done quite a lot in my time. It is not the most enthralling of sports. So you need some enthusiasm. What can we do? Be more creative, be more challenging with your swim sets. For instance, this little block of work it might just suit a public session a little bit more, because it's not quite so strict. It's an unknown amount of 150-meter swims, resting 30 seconds in between each 150 in 15 minutes. Count how many you get done. Have a short breather. Repeat, but in terms of in 100 meters, resting 20 seconds, how many in 10 minutes? And then you finish with a certain number of 50 meters, resting 10 seconds. How many do you get done in 5 minutes? And can you see how that ratio is all sort of proportionate? So if you start your pacing well, you might get 6, 7, 8, who knows, it's an unknown for whoever or however you're swimming, but then you should get the same number of 100 meters done, the same number. It's a challenge. By watching the clock tick down, not chasing someone in particular, but using the clock in a different way, it might just simulate a little bit of enthusiasm, bit of motivation to keep you working hard. If the pool allows you to elevate your heart rate, obviously there's a lot of things to consider, and obviously you don't want to be breathing heavy over your neighbors. So with care, please, with care. Don't be too elaborate when you're in a swimming session. This is an amazing session I found from an Olympic coach, and getting one of his 10K swimmers ready for trials. And there's lots of elements to this. This is unlikely to be your session. This is unlikely, or even looking at this format, just keep it simple. Here we've got, you know, things to practice on the start of a long swim. Steady front end, covering any breaks if this is the world of open water swimming rather than try. You know, what happens if you're a little bit tired and some things start to happen in terms of the race? Climbing back onto the pack, the finish. This is an amazing block of work, very complicated and probably not best, but it's extreme, but I just wanted to illustrate. If you are forced into some slow swimming in your public session, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. Good swim technique starts slow. That's a given. You know, if you look at the great Alexander Popov and some YouTube clips of him swimming, he used to do an awful lot of drills at a very slow pace. Equally, he did some very fast stuff at the right time, but he worked and worked and still has one of the most perfect swimming techniques. If you look at Alexander Popov, Ian Thorpe, Katie Ledecky, you know, over the last 20 years, those are some names on YouTube. If you see someone demonstrating swimming technique and their pool is in the shape of a kidney, you know, in the back garden in a Florida garden, you know, I would not be taking too much notice of that. But look out for those names on YouTube, and you can't go far wrong. Grant Hackett, another great name, some really good technique to watch. Obviously Michael Phelps as well. Now obviously they don't really swim open water, but you will get the underwater footage at the Olympics, and the mechanics are the same. Really, there's different things to consider in the new environment of open water, but the fundamentals of streamlined propulsion, pulling with palm, with forearm, you know, those remain the same and should be good principles to work. I mentioned keeping motivated within your swim training, literally during the session. What can help? Be accountable, use your watch. Don't get overly carried away with just recording, you know, junk mileage for the sake of it, of impressing friends on Strava or whatever. But, you know, be accountable. If you're aiming for, and I tend to prefer to talk about, you know, a number of sessions per month, because on a weekly basis you can hit those 4 swims and then reward yourself with 2 the week after, and it kind of gets a bit bumpy. You know, set yourself a monthly target, try to work towards that, but don't let it become too limited. 1 swim per week is 6 days of unlearning, one of my favorite little sayings, and that really is important. It doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be huge amounts of distance, but just frequency is really good. And if you've got the ability to get to the pool on a regular basis, your swimming will really improve. Try to avoid taking a break in the autumn. I say that, and we've obviously just come out of lockdown in the autumn, but maybe for future planning next year. I'm just kind of relating things now that have helped us in the past. We record week 1, week 12 in our fitness blocks, and for those that miss the autumn, if we have 12 weeks spread 4 quarters of the year, those that miss the autumn as a reward, and yeah, you should ease back, you should lighten the load, but skipping the water completely leaves you really in a sort of a depleted state when you try to hit the water in January. You know, levels of progress between those that swam through the autumn, again I'm talking about Northern Hemisphere now, forgive me for if anyone's joining us from the Southern Hemisphere, but obviously the autumn, people that have raced in the summer months for us, try not to slack off completely. That will not help. And again, don't be too disheartened about not being with your teammates. You know, slowing down, not being, you know, teased along to the faster paces with your particular lane at your tri club. You know, not swimming with your group can help you focus on technique. You can take some time away and you will come back a better swimmer. I mentioned using the social platforms. You know, there's lots of stuff out there, but don't let it become junk just for the sake of recording it. We introduced this concept, the Intelligent Training Aid. Our first product was the session in a bottle. You know, that's a nice, easy, simple way. You've got your session, it's staring you on your face, in your face, on the edge of poolside. You've got 6 main sets to choose from. It's something to look at and be accountable towards. And as mentioned earlier, you know, I know a lot of swimming sessions, but by the time I get onto poolside, I can really flake off. And if I'm not in the mood, or the pool's not right, or if there's too many people, but if I've got something printed, obviously this is better because it's not going to get soggy and get chewed up, this will be helpful. So have a think about that. Only £8, 6 main sessions. You've got your warm-up that reads around the top of the bottle, your subset. We've got videos for helping with drills and so on the website. What else can we think about during this odd time while we wait for pool access to stabilize? Now, obviously, it's a combination of all of those things, really. It's replacing swimming with dry land. It's thinking about good technique. It's watching good technique. It's keeping fit and healthy. It's doing anything extra, watching the images, visualization. All of these things will help. Now, if you can get to a public session, there's things you can do to make that a little bit more tolerable, and I would really recommend that. Patience obviously is going to be a key factor. Patience, being adaptable, working a little harder, a little smarter, and that's not just literally physically harder work. There may be some sacrifices, there may be some things to contemplate, there may be some decisions to make. Can you get into open water sooner next year? The image is looking pretty chilly. I'm not a fan of cold open water, but it might just help you if you start to plan and prepare now. Start taking the cooler showers. Start sleeping with the window open if your partner allows or can join in that little fun activity. But in all seriousness, these things might just help you get into, if your local lake opens and you're just not fond of cooler water and you've not done any preparation and the pools are still closed, then you could have worked towards that possibly. It's just an idea. When you do get into open water, what I would like to see is people actually training. And at our lake, I don't see much of this. I don't see people bringing fins, bringing their paddles, maybe a drag suit over the top of their wetsuit to help them work a little bit harder. I see very little structure. People arrive, they do a couple of laps, they get out, they have a chat, they've done their open water swim. I think if we've got limited pool space, limited pool access, then training in open water is going to be really, really important. Highly recommended. If you have a look at any of our training plans for the triathlon distances or open water distances, there will be sessions in lakes and there are structure to them, and that's not a bad thing to help you replace what might be missing in terms of swimming pools. More swim specific dry land, we've talked about that. Find time for it, keep the shoulders healthy. Okay, well, you may not want to invest in a swim bench, but if you can keep the shoulders healthy using your stretch cords with some simple prehab exercises, so you don't go down the route of having to waste time with rehab and working on physio exercises, but prehab would be really useful. Again, if you can't get to the pool, at least do something constructive that will help replace it, or prepare you for it, let's say. And talking about the price of a swim bench, they come up reasonably on eBay now and again. I haven't bought a disc wheel in quite some time, but there are probably some comparisons in the price there. What if you haven't got access to the pool and you can't get into your lake? Could a swim bench work for you? Do you have space? You should certainly be on the stretch cords at the very least. But what are your options? Let's weigh that up. Could it be something you invest in? It will be really, really helpful if this year stays, well, the next year at least stays a little bit unstable. I mentioned the paddling pool earlier. Might be a cheaper option. I think the cost with the water being emptied, unless you get one of these with a filtration system, that could start to be a little bit of a headache, really. The Tether idea, if you look up power racks, colleges in the US where I swam, we've been using this Tether idea where you swim away from the wall with a belt, with an elastic, and you swim away from the pool deck, and a weight travels up and over to create resistance. So if you're in a tether in a paddling pool, there's nothing wrong with that. That will work. If travel is allowed, try to start thinking about training camps now. If you need a little boost, if a training camp is on the cards, often certainly on our camps, we have 2 or 3 swims per day. I go to Lanzarote on a regular basis, go to Italy in May with a good friend of ours, Steve True, GB Olympic coach from 2000, and 2 to 3 swims, access to open water. If travel is on the cards, then that might be something to think about. 7 days of concentrated effort will massively have you improve. I know it's not something you can continue once you finish and return home, but it will bring a massive boost. We've seen the stats. I should have supplied some images of that, but if you're interested in what's feasible in a week of dedicated swimming in terms of times, in terms of reduction of stroke count, in terms of literally body position elevating, then happy to supply that. Probably written on most topics regarding open water, and if you look on our app, it's free. You will find lots of the articles in their original magazine formats to download, to read, and you can catch up on wetsuit fitting, you know, making use of equipment and so on. But by all means, have a look at that. The training plans are there, and we are, if you are going back to a public session and you haven't swum in the last month, then there is a 2-week introductory return to fitness plan there. Just to wrap up, I'm Dan at swimfortry.com, been coaching a long time at all levels, open water, triathlon. I volunteer at the London Disability Swim Club. I've helped Eid, you may have seen on the news, a refugee learning to swim faster with a hope to go in towards the Olympics in the refugee status team. Who knows how all of those things are going to unfold. I have a real passion for swimming. I like to look at all aspects of it and help in any way I can. So please, Dan at swimfortry.com, drop me a line. I do hope this has helped.